Oh, yeah.
See, we'll do some forward, then we got a new one just a minute.
After, between 6 and 7.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, okay.
Maybe just add it. Just add it.
Oh, for, Chevrolet. Gotcha. I'm gonna say.
Green shoe. 6 o'clock straight up.
Are we all ready? Are you guys ready on that? Gene, you ready?
Cell phones, cell phones, cell phones.
Did we take something off?
We added the Labor Day parade.
Yeah, that, okay.
Because it came in today, I sent the email.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yes, sir. Oh, that's why.
We were planning to have them.
That's why I turned mine, I make sure I have mine on. You're right. I left mine.
Okay, you guys ready down here? I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, roll call. Oh, no. We have a moment of silent reflection. And while we're silently reflecting, let's keep in our thoughts and our prayers all those who were affected by the flash flood in Texas this last weekend. Pray that they find anyone else missing alive. Thank you. Now, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Trustee Todd Lloyd,
Here.
Treasurer Clee,
Present.
Trustee Leverett,
Present.
Supervisor Miller,
Here.
Clerk Triplett here, Trustee McIntyre,
Here.
and Trustee Burt.
Present.
All present, thank you.
Do we have any additions or deletions from this evening's agenda? I know that we were planning the audit, we reviewed the audit, we were prepared to have the audit, and I neglected to make sure it was on the agenda. So we are adding that. It'll be the next thing on our agenda. And we received a request from the Sheriff's Department that resolution for the Labor Day parade permit was added. That's action item E. That's all we have. And you'll notice that we had another presentation scheduled, but due to a scheduling conflict, that will be postponed till a later meeting. So at this point, we will look at approving the minutes of the regular meeting, June 16th, 2025. Any corrections to those minutes?
See now.
See him in here.
See.
So the one thing I'm not sure if we need to add, but I remember if you'll recall, we had a resident whose father passed away, and he was trying to sell his house. The water's off for past due bill, and we granted him some time. We approved let's see, what's this say? It was from June 2nd, if you'll look at that. It's action item A on June 2nd. Motion was to turn on the water with delayed payment of the $400. The one thing I wanted to add to that, if we could, was to make sure that that bill has to be paid. Didn't want to alleviate that bill. There's thousands of dollars owed, right? Do you remember how much that was? I don't remember off the top of my head either. I just wanted to make sure, because we clarified that with him, it just wasn't reflected here, that he's still obligated to pay the past due.
Okay. He said after closing, they would settle up,
Yep.
you know, with whoever their title company was, they would clear all the back taxes.
I just wanted to make sure it was reflected in the
So what do you want the minutes to reflect? That was action item which one on the 16th?
A. that we allowed the water to be turned on with a delay payment of the $400 on the property, and that the past due bill had to be paid. He said it would be paid with the sale of the property. So, just that it didn't alleviate his responsibility for the past due.
So the past due amount must be paid, right?
Yes. Are there any other corrections of the minutes of the June 16th meeting, which has a few sets of minutes on it? No, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the regular meeting from June 16th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, those stand approved. The next set of minutes are from the board and staff workshops, work session, whatever you want to call it, that are in the packet. Anybody see any corrections on those? Any-
I see none.
Other than the date doesn't look right.
Did you find?
Date on the top of that doesn't look right.
There's a June 30th.
Oh, I'm looking at the 27th. Whoops. 19th and then the 27th.
Any corrections? No? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the work session from June 30th signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Can I just say, I still don't see the June 16th minutes in here. Even though we just passed it, I don't see them. Yes, no?
June
So
2nd,
I could
you
have
got the
overlooked
3
it
sets of
first.
minutes, then you have the,
May 19th. And May 27th.
the authorization to pay the bills, you have the special assessment certifications, you have the abatement for Myrtle Grove, and you have,
You talking about from the staff meeting?
no,
No, minutes of the regular meeting, June
the
16th.
hiring of 2 on-call firefighters.
The minutes.
Here,
Yeah.
flip through the, yeah, go ahead. I see them in there.
We didn't move on, I just wanted to say that.
So we did approve those.
Proclamation.
We'll move on to
Proclamation.
audit presentation. We have Plant Moran here,
Those are all approved.
Pam Hill and Christopher Gilbert, in intern, to present the audit.
Thank you for having us here this evening. My name is Pam Hill, audit partner with Plant Moran, and I have with me here today Chris Gilbert, senior manager. We're here to present the results for the audit for your 12/31/2024 fiscal year end. So we do have some slides, I think, is in the past. I know there's a lot of information that we present for the audit, so we kind of summarize the audit process down to a handful of slides here to cover the fiscal year. We know you're about 6 months into the new year, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on the numbers from last year, but still just a highlight of the audit process. So within the audit, it actually continues to get a little bit more complex. Not only are there new standards, but this year the township had a federal compliance audit where we actually were performing testing on 2 separate audit programs. So a little bit more in depth than what we've had in the past, and we'll touch a little bit on that as we go through the results of the deliverables where we are today. So for the audited financial statements, again, you should have those in your packet. I did want to just make sure to recognize, while the audit was a little bit more complex, again, this year, we do spend quite a bit of time auditing all of these different reports and requirements, and so wanted to make sure to acknowledge Mr. McIntyre. I know he spends a lot of time not only preparing for the audit, but then also working with us over the last 3-4 months to complete all the various audits. So really appreciate all his team, him and his team, also Supervisor Miller, Clerk Triplett, and Treasurer Klee. You spent a lot of time with us as well, and we appreciate all of your insight as we plan for the audit, and then also just your involvement in all of our recommendations that we have towards the end of the audit and our closing meeting. So really appreciate you as well and your departments in helping to make sure the audit gets done timely. So talk a little bit about the results for the audit. So we did issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. Basically, what that means is you can rely on the numbers as they are stated within the financial statements. And Chris is going to touch on in a few slides what those numbers look like, but you can rely on those numbers. So good news there. Unmodified opinion, that's what you want. As I mentioned, we did perform a federal compliance audit. We are about 95% done with that. That is not due until 9:30. We fully expect that to be done within the next week to 2 weeks. So, like I said, we're super close, but it was not due on June 30th, and so we focused on getting the township audit done by the state deadline. And this one will be done shortly. It was a lot, like I said, it was a little more work this year. We were required to test 2 major federal programs this year and the spending of those dollars. The township actually spent almost $1.4 million of federal money during fiscal year 2024, which is more than what you typically spend. So that's good news is you're getting more dollars for the township, but there is obviously some extra requirements from the federal perspective to ensure compliance with the spending. As of now, we did test the spending of the highway safety dollars and then also the ARPA funding. We do have one tentative finding related to compliance with the federal programs, and it relates to a requirement that when you enter into a contract with a vendor for federal, that you're using federal dollars for, you're required to check the suspension and debarment listing just to make sure that vendor isn't on the listing. We were unable to obtain documentation that was done prior to entering into the contract. The good news is the township did verify that, and that vendor was not on the list. So there aren't any question costs. The costs were spent appropriately. It's an internal control type item, and I know additional, in speaking with management, additional procedures will be put in place going forward to ensure that that documentation is retained, and that's done prior to entering into a contract. So that was one item to date on the single audit or the federal compliance audit. And then the financial highlights, we're going to cover those in a few slides. But I did want to just talk a little bit on the next slide related to our end of audit letter communication. So if you'll recall, prior to the audit starting, we send a letter out to the township board that talks a little bit about what our plan for the audit is going to be. Just a follow-up to that letter. So happy to report that we did not have any financial statement internal control findings. So if you remember, there was one finding last year related to segregation of duties, and the township has done a great job at looking at those internal controls, making the appropriate adjustments, and ensuring that second set of reviews or those additional segregation of duties were put into place in fiscal year 24. So that finding was not repeated from last year. One other item to note is there was a new accounting standard that the township implemented this year related to the accounting for compensated absences or sick leave, vacation leave, things that get paid out upon termination or at the end of the year. So there was some additional calculations that Kevin and his team had to do in order to ensure that the numbers were appropriately updated for this new accounting standard. So you'll see that as you look through the financial statements that'll look a little bit different this year. And then lastly, we did have to note a budget deficit in the municipal street fund. As you're all aware, with the funding related to special assessments, there's a timing difference between when the revenue comes in and when the money is spent. So this is not anything new, but we do have to continue to report it to the state, and you will have to continue to file that deficit elimination plan with the state every year until the special assessment money is fully collected. And then we did have a few other recommendations in the letter. I'm not going to go into them in great detail, but we do have a couple pages, and we've talked about this in several years, or the last several years, and Chris will touch on it a little bit further as he gets into some of the numbers. But just continuing to really take a look at the general fund and water and sewer funds from a long-term financial condition. I know when we tend to look at it just 1 year at a time, you might have some ARPA dollars or things that make maybe the general fund look a little bit better on a short-term basis, and same with water and sewer. So just continuing to remind you to take a look at that from a long-term perspective. What are the decisions you're making today? How is that affecting the fund balance in those funds, in the long term? And then also kind of coupling that long-term planning with your capital needs that you have. So that would be something just from a sustainability perspective for the general fund and water and sewer fund that we continue to recommend. The other item that we wanted to talk about, and I know we've discussed this with management the last several years, but just continuing to be very cautious as you look at making any advances. So in the past, water and sewer has advanced funds for some special assessment projects. We know water and sewer has their own capital projects that need to be done, et cetera. And so continuing just to be very cautious and looking at, is this the right thing to do to be advancing these dollars versus saying, no, we need to postpone the project, et cetera. And looking at the whole picture there. And then lastly, another recommendation we had just relates to staffing and continuing to look at that. We know you've had budget constraints over the years, and as people have kind of shifted positions, you've done some things in order to kind of save on the budget. Just continuing to look to make sure that not only just finance, but other individuals that are part of the internal controls for financial reporting, just making sure that you have enough individuals to fully fulfill all the job duties and ensure the integrity of the internal controls. So just continuing to take a look at those responsibilities and as you move people around into different positions. And then there's also some legislative items that we have included in the letter. I wasn't planning on going through those in detail today. Of course, new accounting standards that happen every year. Those are not going to stop over the next couple years. And then just some other legislative updates that we've included for your information as well. But we have covered those in detail with management at our closing meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and have him cover kind of high level some of the numbers.
All right, thanks, Pam. So for the next handful of slides, we're just going to take the 70, 80 pages of the financial statements and just summarize them into some brief highlights, just some key takeaways. So I'm starting on slide 5, looking specifically at the general fund and looking at revenue over the last 5 years. So looking at that, total revenue in fiscal year 2024 was around $13.5 million, and a few highlights for general fund. So property taxes, one of the main revenue sources, was consistent with the previous year, 2023, as millage rates have not changed. State revenue was actually down about $300,000 from 2023. So your main driver of state revenue is your state shared revenue from the state. That was consistent with the previous year. Just you received a grant from MERS, a state grant from MERS last year to help with the pension plan to fund that. So that was the only difference. Taking that outside, your routine revenue sources were consistent with the previous year in that category. Your third largest category is special assessment revenue. That was down about $140,000 in total from 2023. Now the garbage and street lighting portion of that was up. However, the roads portion of those special assessment revenue was down due to, in 2023, there was just some significant early payoffs of some of those long-term special assessments. So in total, revenue was, you'll see here in 22, 23, and 24, significantly higher. And that is largely due to one-time federal and state grant revenue. As Pam mentioned, we had the federal compliance audit with ARPA funds and some other federal funds. A lot of the ARPA went through the general fund, so along with other significant temporary state grant revenue that was used to help cover operational expenditures. So that's just important to keep in mind in the last 3 years of why the revenue was higher. So without the one-time federal and state grants, annual total revenue would have been closer to in the 12 million range. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. So going to slide 6, I won't spend much time here. This is essentially the same information, but just looking at 2024 and kind of looking at it from a pie chart perspective. So essentially, what the key takeaways here is that, again, property taxes and state revenue are your two largest revenue sources, 33% and 27% respectively, and then special assessments remains third at about 15% of your total general fund revenue. So then moving right along to slide 7, total expenditures, and again, this is specifically for your general fund. Total expenditures in 2024 was about 12.4 million. The general government category has remained relatively consistent with the previous years. Public safety does remain the highest at about 6.8 million in 2024. That was a decrease from 2023. However, in 2023, you had a one-time purchase for a fire truck. So that was a big portion of the increase in 2023. So 24 was back down a little bit to normal, which is, again, that's the main reason why the total expenditures were down from 23. And then the public works category, expenditures, if you look back a couple of years, were higher in 21 and 22. That was with the significant road projects that were ongoing in those years, but they have stabilized in recent years in 23 and 24. So going to slide 8, similar concept here, just looking at it from a different perspective. As mentioned, public safety was the largest at about 55% of total general fund expenditures. And then your general government category was about 26%, and public works was about 18% of total general fund expenditures. So then moving along to slide 9. Last slide on general fund, but just looking at the whole picture here. So this is, again, looking at year-over-year trends in the general fund, looking at total revenue and total expenditures compared to your fund balance. So fund balance specifically has grown to about 5.9 million at the end of 24. But that, again, just putting in perspective, a lot of that is due to the one-time federal and state grant revenue that you have. So temporary revenue sources that you're not always going to have every year. So without those grants, the general fund would have been closer to break even or operating at a deficit in any given year, and that has really been reflected in recent budgets as you've, I think, budgeted for a deficit in your 25 budget. So that has been kind of reflected in the most recent years. But that said, I think this just kind of putting this all together, this kind of highlights the importance of just assessing ongoing structural shortfalls, as well as just continuing to develop a long-term strategy, as Pam mentioned, that doesn't rely on temporary funding and is looking at your recurring revenue sources that are more stabilized and that you can, what's within your control there. And I think we just continue to also recommend looking at a 5-year forecast to help in your long-term planning, just really to help understand the long-term impact of annual financial decisions and to just help to support sustainable budgeting. Any questions on general fund before we move on to the next slide? All right, slide 10, moving right along. So while we saw the general fund accounts for much of the public safety expenditures, I think the police and fire millage fund does account for revenue from the public safety millage along with certain police and fire activities. So as you'll see here, the same thing with the 5-year trend analysis, putting the whole fund into picture. So total revenue and expenditures in 2024 for that fund were both at nearly 3.5 million. So these figures are relatively consistent with the previous year, 2023, resulting in nearly break even, for that fund, and ending in a fund balance of around $803,000 in the police and fire millage fund. All right, so moving on to slide 11, looking specifically at your sewer and water fund combined. So this slide is showing, again, operating revenue, operating expenses, as well, and the operating revenue is in the teal color, while operating expenses is in orange. So in 2024, there was a total revenue of about $15.6 million compared to total expenses of about $14.8 million, which is relatively consistent with 2023. So the water and sewer funds are designed to be self-supporting, so the user fees are intended to cover the full cost of operating the services of those funds. So we also included here, there's a couple of lines that just show your unrestricted net position as well as the cash balances for comparison for the combined fund. And as you can see, the top line, the yellow tan line, is your unrestricted net position, which is about $14.6 million. And that's about 92% of your total net position, which the remaining 8% is your net investment in capital assets. And that's sort of what Pam was getting at earlier with just this may suggest that the infrastructure assets are aging. So meaning that future repairs or replacement costs are likely. And I know management, we've discussed this in the past, I know management has been looking into this and looking at long-term planning, actively monitoring these numbers, and just continued planning for just long-term infrastructure needs. I know we're kind of moving along pretty fast, but any questions on water and sewer before we talk about legacy costs? If not, we'll move to slide 12, and these last three slides we'll go through pretty quickly here, but looking at your long-term legacy costs. So the first one here, the township does have two pension plans. You have a MERS plan for your general employees, public safety, and there also is a firefighter's pension plan that has been closed for quite some time. So this slide is specifically on that fire pension plan. So that plan in particular, the net pension liability was about $1.9 million at the end of 12/31/2024. And that means the plan was just shy of, was right around 82% funded. So this is a well-funded plan, and that did experience, you'll see here in the middle, a temporary dip in 2022, just with when the market was down after COVID, but it has since began to recover strongly. And again, just want to remind you that these are snapshots at a point in time, but that's where the fire pension plan is as of 12/31/24. And the next slide, on slide 13, focuses specifically on the MERS plan for general employees and public safety. This plan is a little unique, which is reported on a one-year lag. So it's a standard practice for all MERS plans in the state. But just to keep in reminder that this is a year behind. So it's, again, a snapshot at a point in time. So as of the most recent reporting year, the net pension liability for the MERS plan was about $19.2 million. And the plan was just shy of 58% funded. So similar story here with the plan experiencing a temporary decline just with the market conditions after COVID. But again, now the plan has had a couple of years since to help recover towards downturn levels. And again, just important to remember, snapshot at a point in time, and just fluctuations are expected based on market performance and actuarial assumptions. There's certain things that are within your control, but also certain things that are not within your control here. So, all right, lastly, one more slide. This is your OPEB, or retiree healthcare plan. So at the end of 2024, the township's net OPEB liability stood at $16.4 million after accounting for assets in the plan. And this is about 10% funded, which first is a notable improvement from if you were to look back at 3% in 2020. And if you were to go back to 2018, you would notice the plan was at about 1% funded. So noticeable improvement there, but while OPEB funding levels remain significantly lower than pension funding, it is a common challenge that's faced by many municipalities. So the state is focusing on pension right now. I know the state wants you to be at 60%. That's kind of right where you're at. OPEB, they want you to be at 40%, but that is, and if you're not, they want to just know a corrective action plan that's been submitted by the township just to show how you're going to get to the 40%. So again, the township has been proactively addressing this long-term liability, essentially by contributing amounts recommended by your actuary, and then also just continuing to look at additional strategies to help improve the funding status.
So the OPEB should see a big change sooner than later, because all the retirees are still receiving that health care, but any new hires do not receive that. Starting in, was it 2022 that we negotiated?
I don't recall.
I think we started the
That makes sense.
retiree health care savings plan back in, was it 18? It was optional.
Yes.
And several employees transitioned over, maybe almost 20. And then I think it was in 22, it's a part of the contract where no one gets retiree health care anymore. They are all part of the retiree health care savings plan, so they can save a percentage of their wages, and we can contribute to those. But when they leave, that's all they receive. And so this should, at some point, this should drop significantly.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you do see in 2022, I think is where you mentioned, there was, if you look at the net OPEB liability, it did decrease about $6 million from 21 to 22, which I think is partially a reflection of that, so, should continue to.
A whole lot more. And then the fire retirement pension plan, that's a closed plan. There's one active in it, and if the market goes well, that should see better funding. I mean, it was at 1.90% funded. And then the MERS pension plan. What year did we have the Protect My Pension plan? We got money from the state to get us to 60%.
That was 23 last year.
So we got a certain amount to get us to 60%, but it's not reflected here.
Oh, yeah. It is, but the market conditions.
Yeah.
Didn't help us.
Okay,
It is reflected in there.
alrighty. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask at this time? Go ahead.
Okay. So how are we doing, like overall, what would you say, if on a grade like A, B, C, D?
Sure.
A.
So I guess I'm not sure that I can give a grade, but I would say maybe kind of big picture, sort of kind of maybe bookend what both Chris and I talked about. You have been able to add to fund balance because of these one-time revenues. So I think minus those, you will have some challenges going forward in terms of just looking at your budget and being able to maintain your operations, especially given some of the long-term challenges you have. So, Ms. Miller talked a little bit about that with the pension and OPEB, and you've done a lot of things to really try to reduce those long-term legacy costs that you have. So you've been very proactive. In recent years, I think part of the problem is it's going to take a very long time for you really to fully bear the fruit of some of those changes. So you have already seen some of them, but it's going to be a while before you really get those large reductions. So what you're doing now is going to be very beneficial 15, 20 years from now, but it's still not going to have a really large impact on your current budget. And the other piece is, and we mentioned this in our letter, and Chris and I both talked about the aging infrastructure. So we know the townships has a lot of aging infrastructure, and that's going to continue to be a challenge. So when you couple the sort of annual operating challenges, your very limited ability to raise revenue, right? So there's a lot of state laws that kind of limit you and what you're able to do from a revenue generation standpoint. And then you couple that with some of the long-term challenges from a capital perspective and a legacy cost perspective. I do think that there are some challenges that you definitely, I know you're all aware of, that you'll need to continue to address. I would say from, looking, so that's from a kind of long-term picture from the township. I would say from an audit process, though, and how that went, I think that went very well. The numbers as they are presented, you can rely on them. They're in good shape. We didn't come in. We didn't make a whole bunch of adjustments. Management appropriately addressed the one finding we had last year. I know the one we noted on the federal compliance, there's already new procedures in place. So I think from an internal control and a really wanting to continue to move forward and make those changes and recommendations that we've had, I commend you for doing that. Your budget has been a challenge, but you've really kept a really good eye on that. You came in under budget from not only your original budget, but your amended budget in the general fund. I know your team is continuing to look for additional revenue sources in any way you can, hence the additional grant revenue. Treasurer Klee has been able to really increase that interest income, which any little bit helps, right? So I think from doing what you can and trying to control it, you have done that, but I do think you're going to have some challenges from a long-term perspective.
So if you compare Flint Township to, another municipality, along the same lines that face the same challenges that we have, how are you able to resolve, or, can you compare us to a...
Yeah, so that's a good question. We audit a lot of governments, right? And everyone is so uniquely different. Some of them don't have any legacy costs. Now, that's very rare, but there are some, and there are some in the county that don't. Some of them have the same challenges that you do from a long-term legacy perspective. So I think a lot of it is some of the suggestions we've already made, right? Like the long-term planning, when you're making kind of these annual decisions, really looking out to say, what is this going to do, in the long term? Because I think if you were to look back kind of 40, 50 years ago to maybe some of the decisions that were made from a pension perspective or a retiree health care perspective, they were very short-sighted, right? So let's just give them retiree health care. Who cares? We don't have to pay anything in now. And now here you are all 30 years later, 40 years later, saying, crap, well, now we have to pay all these people. And what are we going to do? And so I think it's really, it is a challenge, right? And so I think just continuing to look at it from a long-term perspective and to try to foresee as much as you possibly can what those decisions you are making today, what impact they will have in the future, and then continuing to do what you're doing, looking for additional revenue sources where you can, cutting where you can. I know you've already done a lot of that. I don't know that there's much left to do from that perspective, because that creates additional challenges as well, right? So I think just continuing to do what you're doing, being conscious of it, and looking at the long-term impact. There's not much more you can do.
Okay.
But we are on the right track, right?
Like I said, you're doing what you can, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the struggle that communities, much like yourself, have is you are so constrained in what you can do from a revenue raising perspective, and you've already cut so much, because if you were to go back to, like, let's just say 2001, when they started cutting state shared revenue, as Chris showed, that's 30-some% of your revenue stream, and this is 24 years ago, but I still remember when they started cutting that, and that was a huge revenue stream, especially for townships, and that's really had a dramatic impact on budgets, where you were getting kind of this annual increase, you know, it got cut so much, and now you're really barely getting an inflationary type increase, not to mention that statutory piece got cut so much, 20 plus years ago, that if that would have just kind of kept going on the rate it was going, we used to do a graph on that, and I think we kind of stopped doing it, but it's millions of dollars that the township would have over the 20 years so it's a struggle with the state budget where that's going to be. And so, not to keep rambling, but it's difficult for especially townships where you're really limited in terms of what you can do to raise revenues.
So along with the state cutting those shared revenues, they've implemented a permanent veterans exemption, and I'm all for that, but there's no replacement of those funds. And then they also cut and I don't like the tax, but it's a personal property tax. For anyone under, it was 80,000, now it's any business with under 180,000, right? That limit, it's cut, and that's gone. Maybe rightfully so, and the businesses are happy about that, but that's revenue that the township used to receive and we don't anymore. Anyhow. So, I mean, you have a revenue issue or you have a spending issue, expenses. And we know there's two ways to increase revenue. And we need to grow. That's our bottom line, is to grow. That's what we see other townships doing.
Yeah, and you've done a lot in that area too, with the CIAs and the trying to attract businesses and such. I mean, that's come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years. So,
Any other questions, Tanisha?
I do have.
Sure.
one more. Okay. So are we in compliance? Did you find that we're in compliance with using, what do you call the coronavirus dollars? ARPA. Are we in compliance with using the ARPA funds?
yes, so everything except for the one item that I noted related to the debarment. So you are in compliance. However, there was an internal control related item in that you did not check if the contractor was suspended and debarred before you entered into a contract with them. You did go back and check it after the fact, and they were not on the list, so you are in compliance. But it's just implementing a new process to make sure that check is done beforehand.
Was that ARPA dollars or a different grant?
Yes, it was ARPA.
So
yeah.
that's a one-time thing. I don't expect that we'll get more ARPA dollars going
Right, and it
forward.
very well could have been that it was checked, we just couldn't see documentation saying that it was. So our recommendation was to have that documentation and retained in your packet.
Check the most wanted list. No.
Yeah.
Any other
Right.
questions?
Kind of.
This way, Trustee Vert, do you have any questions? Trustee McIntyre? This way, do you have any questions, Trustee Leverett?
No.
Treasurer Clee?
Been through it. Thank you.
Triplett? I don't either.
Good job.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and
you.
thank you very much, Kevin. I know it's a lot of work. So, the single audit for the federal dollars, the ARPA and JAG and stuff like that, when will, you're 92%, 95%?
We're pretty close to being done. I would expect that we'll be dating this month and it'll be finalized, so.
Is there a deadline with the state on that?
No, there is a federal deadline, which is September 30th, so it'll be well before then, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. You're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to go.
That was an easy decision on Kevin's part. Exit stage left.
I'll stay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question. So we will move on to public comment. If you'd like to address the board, I'd ask that you come to the podium, give us your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
My name is Brian Hughes. I'd like to talk on the subject of the immigration arrests that had taken place in the township at Dutcher and Old Farm Road. I understand there was about 10 people that had been arrested and hauled away. I'm not sure where they were taken, though. There has not been any reports as to whether they had committed any crimes. I'm not even sure if they were illegally immigrants. It has been proven that ICE are arresting people solely by racially profiling people. There have been arrests of U.S. citizens. There's been arrests of people here with visas that the president has recently revoked, and along with illegal immigrants themselves. The people that are here as immigrants, whether they're legal or not, for the most part, I believe they're here to try to make their families a better life. The ICE is a federal agency which is funded currently now by $100 billion of federal tax money. They're also given that money for the Border Patrol and detention centers, like the Alligator Alcatraz that they're just now putting together. So there's a lot of funds that they have to make these raids and arrests. See, they're also, out of this $100 billion, each agent will be receiving $42,000 of bonuses on top of their salaries. So there's no reason for them, I believe, that they need to come to the local areas and request assistance by our local police in their raids and arrests. There's plenty of ICE agents. They're adding another 10,000 agents. And to do that, they're taking away our local tax money and manpower to serve this community by doing that. And from what I've heard from the chief wrangler in the meetings that I've been coming to, is that his average calls per day are 80 calls a day in that area. So to take away from those officers to assist ICE agents that are fully funded completely and take it from our local tax money, I think there's a better way of doing this. And I wish that we could take a look at how we can keep that money or try to refund some of that money back to us for the services that our officers are providing the ICE agents, instead of just giving it to them when we don't have to give. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board?
Good evening. How are we all doing today? After hearing that report there on income, I've always thought, you know, about them tiny homes, small homes, less than 1,000 square foot. Maybe we could do that in some neighborhoods that have dilapidated houses that are gone, instead of requiring 1,500, 2,000 square foot homes. You know, you have a tiny home, or if there's some areas that want to be developed, we could do that, and that'll bring older people, well, or whatever, people that want to live on one level versus stairs and all that stuff. And that would be a revenue generator, because if they own their home, they're more likely to take care of the place and pay their bills, whereas other people tend not to do that. I won't categorize anybody, or any group, but that's one thing we may want to look at, is revising our, what do you call it? Building codes, so that we are allowed to build smaller homes that allow people to move into the area. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board? No? One more time? Last call on the public comment? All right, we'll close that and we'll move on to reports. I wanted to say that we got a lot of complaints, handful. That's a lot to me, but when you consider the number of pickups that our waste disposal pickups make on any given day, there's an average of 9,800 homes, and they pick up 3 times at each home during the summertime. A handful is not a lot of complaints, but a lot of people thought that the trash was delayed because of the 4th of July, but the 4th of July was on a Friday, and our trash pickup's on a Thursday, so it wasn't delayed. So those who thought it was delayed and put it out on Friday got missed because they didn't have it out on a Thursday. So I just, if anyone's listening, I just wanted to tell you that the 4th of July did not delay our trash pickup. Also, just going to put the plea out there. I know we have volunteers, and it's sometimes the volunteers don't even come through this office. I know that there's a church on Court Street that cleans from the point where Corona Road and Court Street meet, and they go all the way to 75. That's a church group that does that, but I still see a lot of people throwing trash out the window. I know the trash trucks sometimes lose flying objects out the back, but I see a lot of people throwing trash out their window because they don't want it in their car. We're going to be hanging more signs that say, please do not litter. The comment that was made about the ICE arrests, I just wanted to let you know, our board was not notified that they were coming. It was confidential, apparently. I'll let the police chief comment on what he wants to in regards to that. That's all I have for my report, Madam Clerk.
Yes, so this is from Michigan Secretary of State. Now, any eligible Michigan adults can now obtain their written driver's license online. There's a website for it, and I'll have a couple of sheets up there if you want to be able to access that as well. Also, Attorney Dana Nessel is reminding residents to watch out for common scams when we're having storms. There's different companies that will approach you, and they're not legitimate, so we want to make sure you're aware of that. They're asking you to definitely get in contact with your insurance company, speak to a local or licensed professional, review credentials and references, and get more than one estimate. So just want to bring you up to date on that so that you guys are aware. That's it. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, can I ask a question about the peddler's license?
Yes.
Anybody can call the township and ask in the clerk's office if someone has applied to sell door-to-door, if they've received their peddler's license. It's a permit allowing the businesses to do so, and it comes with a background check.
Yes.
And if they haven't applied, they shouldn't be knocking on your door. And you can make the call to the township, and also if they don't have a peddler's license, you can call the police department. Well, you have to call 911 to have a police dispatched. They'll, if they're able to, because they might be out on a call, but anyway, they'll come and help with that. But they have to have a peddler's license to go door to door in this township.
Yep, and you come to the clerk's department to receive that. We send that off to the police department for the background check. We are getting quite a few of those in the neighborhood too, so, but if they haven't come to the township to receive a permit, they should not be out knocking on your door.
Thank you.
And we also put that, I think our treasurer put that in the newsletter as well
And it's 6
for
p.m.
the residents.
If I'm not mistaken, it's 6 p.m.
Yeah, the cutoff time, I think. Yeah, it is
I think it's 6 p.m.
for
in the
any
evening
peddlers.
that they can't be knocking on your door anymore.
That's all I have.
Mr. Treasurer, do you have a report for us
Yes,
this
good evening. Thank you. Most of you should have received, hopefully you all did, on Saturday, the 28th, or by Monday the 30th, you received your tax bill. The team worked very hard to get them ready, and we mailed them on the 26th. The reason being is there's a state guideline says it has to be in your hand by July 1st. And in order to make that deadline and not be late, we made sure they were sent out. And a lot of folks received them 28th, some received them on the 30th, and graciously came in on the 30th to pay their tax bill, and we had to respectfully ask them to please come back tomorrow, because well, couldn't you, I'll date the check the 1st, and we're like, we can't, because we have to run it, and when we run it, it would show up on the 30th, and that would not be in compliance. So we had a few that came in on the 30th. We asked them respectfully to come back on the 1st, and everyone was understanding. So That's, in case you received it and you wondered why you couldn't pay on the 30th, it's a state statute, but on the state statute as well, we had to have them in your hands by July 1. That's all I have, but I will be asking to pay the bills.
Thank you. Are there any trustee reports? Mr. Leverett?
No, but let me just make a statement again about the trash that you was talking about. And I know we talked about the signs and all that, but I'm trying to figure out what's going on. There was a garbage bag on Linden Road in Beecher, and I picked one up and disposed of it. And when I came back about 2 days later, there's another one there. And I'm trying to figure out, did people intentionally do this or what? But nevertheless, I think that all of the residents of Flint Township ought to be aware, and if we see people doing this kind of a thing, hey, we need to report it or something on that order. We put some signs at the 4 intersections coming into Flint Township saying that it was against the law to be littering, and that it's got a camera on there. So let's be mindful of what's going on, because we're trying to become attractive residentially, commercially, and as well for the entire Flint Township or Genesee County. So let's
Need you to talk up.
let's be mindful of that to make sure that everybody is abreast to this trash coming out in Flint Township.
Thank you, Mr. Leverett. Any trustee reports this way?
Speaking of trash, we're gonna do clean streets, safe streets again. We're gonna continue. The next one is July 19th, 8 to 10, August 9th, and August 30th. I understand the 30th is Labor Day weekend, but I figure we don't get many anyway, so we're still gonna have it on that day. I would encourage anybody to come out and help.
July 19th, August 9th, and August 30th?
Correct, right now.
Do you have a location for July 19th?
Still gonna go to Sears since we can't get that cleaned up for some reason. Best we can.
Alrighty.
So, 8 to 10? 8 to 10.
Any other trustee reports? We can move on to staff report, but before we do that, I want to thank Mary Beth Seward and Barb Vert for their hard work over at the police department. We have the station and the park, and I know that you've taken personal responsibility in making all those flowers over there look beautiful and laying down all that mulch on a very, very hot day, couple days, and just the amount of work it requires. I wanted to say thank you very much. Thank you. Staff reports. Mrs. Tucker, do you have a report for us this evening?
Yes, we do have a planning commission meeting this Thursday. There are a few items on the agenda. One public hearing for a condominium site plan for Baker College area. Well, the old Baker College, it's no longer Baker College. So, and then we have, what was that?
GHS, now we were just
Right.
referring to that.
That, exactly. And then we do have, the grants, we're working on the senior center grant, trying to get that finalized. Deadline on that's July 30th. Getting ready to finalize their, quarterly report. The Eagle, grant that we got for Orchard Grove, Orchard Manor, the quarterly report's due next week. I'm working on that as well. Those buildings are coming along pretty well. The first building, the one that's in Flint Township, all the floors are up. They're working on the exterior now, and they're also working on the exterior of the second building that's on the city of Flint side of the property. If you've not been up there, I would encourage you to go look. It's a great project. There are 3-story buildings that are three-story that have, some, community space and some commercial area on the bottom, and then, apartments up top. So it'll be really nice when it's done, and they're doing a good job. So the Communities First is doing that project with us, and the grant that we're administering for them is through Eagle.
Thank you. Chief Wangler?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Since last board meeting on June 16th, the police department has responded to 1,951 total calls over this, the last 3-week period. This figure includes 1,296 primary calls and 655 backup calls for service. So on average, again, during this 3-week period, our officers responded to over 92 total calls per day. And just to drill into these numbers a little bit more, there were 31 12-hour shifts of 15 or more total calls, and of these, there were 4 12-hour shifts of 20 or more total calls that we responded to. Just want to make an announcement. It'll be further coming. National Night Out is fast approaching, and that will be held on the front lawn of our police station August 5th from 5 to 8 p.m. And then just lastly, specific to the public comment regarding the ICE, in this situation, they had information. They conducted a traffic stop of a vehicle that they had known to have, I guess specific to their investigation. We briefly stood by while, with the uniformed presence, while they had their case. Like you had stated, we didn't receive much information leading up to this.
But are they obligated to notify you when they come into this jurisdiction?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No? So they give you a courtesy call to let you know they're...
A lot of times that would be appreciated. But yeah, independently, they had their own investigation and just asked for us to stand by while they completed theirs.
Okay. Does that complete your...
That completes my
Thank
report.
you
I
very
do
much.
not have anything for the agenda.
Thank you. Assistant Chief Raleigh?
Good evening. Since the last board meeting, the fire department's responded to 71 calls for service, which equaled 140 apparatus responses. This included 6 structure fires, 3 vehicle accidents with entrapment, and 3 vehicle fires. And I have no agenda items.
Thank you. That was easy. We don't have a committee report. Move on to number 9, Mr. Treasurer. Payment of bills, please.
Good evening again, thank you. Authorization to pay the bill versus, via the guidelines in the purchasing policy in Section 8. The motion is to approve payment of the invoices in the amount of $106,076.98. In addition, we acknowledge the payment of invoices and tax distributions in the amount of $1,998,341.87 as authorized again by the board's purchasing policy. And that is my motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Any questions for Mr. Treasurer? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, roll call, please, for the motion to pay the bills in the amount of $106,076.98.
Trustee Vert? No. Trustee McIntyre?
Yes.
Trustee Todd Lloyd?
Yes.
Treasurer Clee?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
Clerk Triplett, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, board.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So does all of our contracts.
Are there any correspondence or informational items?
No.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move on to new business. Action item A is the appointment of Board of Review member. And we have Mr. Randy Wiley here. He's agreed to serve on the Board of Review. That requires training, and we'll of course make sure he's trained. You can't sit on that Board of Review to serve until you complete the training and are certified. So a motion would be in order to appoint Randy Wiley to our Board of Review.
Lee would move to accept the motion presented by the supervisor to appoint Mr. Randy Wiley to the Board of Review.
Is there a second to the motion?
No second.
Any discussion?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, when will you be starting your training, Mr. Wiley? This Wednesday.
You've been, communication with our assessor, Paula Dotson. Alrighty, if
I
there.
had one, I just want to thank the two of you. When you moved into the community, you immediately got involved and wanting to step up to the plate. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. And I know the fire department has appreciated you in this fact that you guys have fed them a couple times down there. So that's appreciated by those guys.
Thank you very
Thank
much. All those in favor of approving the appointment of Randy Wiley to the Board of Review signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much. The next is a permit for Bikes on the Bricks. Madam Clerk?
Every year there is a Bikes on Bricks. I'm trying to get to that. So we've been asked to commit this. I don't have the date. Do you have yours?
You want it?
A motion to approve resolution for the Genesee County Road Commission on behalf of Bikes on the Bricks. I believe the date is in September,
I don't have it in front of me.
September 1st of
Yeah.
2025.
It's Labor Day weekend.
Mhm,
Oh, no,
Labor
this,
Day.
no, I'm sorry, that's the walkout. That's the other one. Hang on, I'm sorry. I had it and I let it go.
You're just
There it is right
approving
here.
the resolution
Yeah.
that they gave you for the
Right, they didn't give us a date.
Genesee County Road.
They
So
didn't
there
do
is no date there, but it is Bikes on the Bricks for, they actually will start,
On the resolution, yeah.
it doesn't say where they start at though.
They start at Vehicle City Harley.
Vehicle Center Harley.
They're going, starting at Vehicle City Harley, as we had told. So we're looking for a motion for that, to allow the police present and escort. And it actually will be on September the 6th, from 10 a.m., beginning on Austin Parkway to
Yep.
Elms Road. Okay. And they're asking for a police escort. So,
So are you moving to approve the
motion.
permit?
I am.
Is there a second to the motion? Or, any further discussion? I think all the information's there. All those in favor of approving the permit to submit to the Road Commission for Bikes on the Bricks signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That stands approved. Thank you very much. Action item C is National Night Out. Madam Clerk? Just got your name on. Listen, we're gonna do this. Chief Wangler.
Okay, this one's for the road closure.
Exactly.
For closing down the road in front of the police station, because that's usually where they have some of the demonstrations by the fire department. And, this is done every year, but in order for them to close that road, we have to make,
Application to.
an application to the county road commission. The resolution is in there that we have to have for the road commission. So it's basically a motion to approve the resolution for the Johnson County Road Commission for the National Night Out for 2025.
So they'll be closing Fleckenstein and Norco intersection from noon until 8 p.m. I bet it's gonna go a little longer than that. Alrighty,
Clee would move to accept the motion to approve the resolution for the Genesee County Road Commission on behalf of Flint Township's National Night Out 2025.
is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the resolution for the permit for National Night Out signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That stands approved. Action item D, you have before you the tentative agreement that the negotiating team has agreed and supported, and COAM, Command Officers Association of Michigan, ratified, I believe it was last Friday, and so it comes to the board for a vote. This TA are the changes that would be made to their 3-year contract. Actually, it's the rest of this half a year and 2 more years on top of that, so it's only 2.5. It ends December 31st, 2027. And a motion is in order to move forward on voting on this tentative agreement.
Clee would move to accept the COAM's tentative agreement as presented and worked on during negotiations.
Is there a second to the motion? Or are there any questions or discussion on the TA?
Good job.
Thank you. Barb, I'm sorry, I was looking down. I looked at Barb, who's seconded, but Karen, if I may, Kevin, yourself, myself, Chief, as well as our negotiating team, spent a lot of hours to go through this, and I'm glad we were able to, with Lieutenant Van Lente as one of the top-notch individuals on your crew, helped us make this happen. So, glad it's done.
So Lieutenant Matt Van Lente has been instrumental in helping us settle these union contracts, and he does a good job, and they offer some creative ideas. And I summarized in our negotiations, of the years I've been here, there were 8 years where there was no increase of the base wage. When we got ARPA dollars, there was COVID dollars that was given as a lump sum, but that did not increase their base wage. And I think this is a fair agreement, and they accepted it, and it did not take a long, I mean, we worked hours, but in comparison, this was, I feel, done very quickly and efficiently. So we appreciate their cooperation. Any other discussion or questions? No? Madam Clerk, roll call please on the motion to approve the tentative agreement with COAM with a contract length stated July 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2027.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Todd Lloyd?
Yes.
Treasurer Clee?
Yes.
Trustee Burt?
Yes.
Trustee McIntyre?
Yes.
Clerk Triplett, yes, and Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
Thank you.
That passes. That sounds great. And the last item on our agenda is a permit from the Sheriff's Department. It's a permit for a Labor Day parade, which would also be submitted to the Genesee County Road Commission. They want to allow a police escorted parade on Monday, September 1st, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. The parade route will start at the Bristol Road Church of Christ, 1315 West Bristol Road, traveling west to Vanslyke, traveling north on Vanslyke to Region 1D at 1940 Atherton Road. So how many police do we, it's them
Yeah, I believe
escorting
this
it.
is the second year that they've had this
Right.
event. We did not provide any assistance in this matter. This is a sheriff's office detail.
Right, I remember that. So they just need to get the permit from the road commission with our approval. A motion is in order?
We would move to accept the resolution and the proposal for a motion to, to make the motion to allow the road closures to the Genesee County Road Commission.
Is there a second to the motion on the permit for the sheriff's permit?
I second.
Any questions or discussion?
I just wanted to say, this is a big parade. It is huge. People didn't see it last year, which was the first year. It goes on forever, and it's quite massive.
So that's September 1st, Monday, September 1st, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Alrighty. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the permit for this, closing the road, Vanslyke, on September 1st, and sending that over to the road commission, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes. That went well. Announcements. Our next meeting is July, sorry,
21st.
July 21st at 6 p.m. here. And there's no further business, and without objection, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, when you gonna mention the